give you an example. When I got my first school, I had never taught a day in my life. I'd never attended a high school, and I became a high school principal without one day of experience as a student or as a teacher. But I had some teachers.
And your full name is Ira
D. Hall. Now we got a little question here. See, I have a son now that's really involved. He's got some big jobs in America. So I didn't start to use his senior until recently because he's becoming so distinguished. So since he's been born and so distinguished, I have to go ahead and put that senior there. So how should I list it? Ira Devoyd Hall Senior? Because that's what I am now. Okay. And that Devoyd is spelled D-E-V-O-Y-D, a capital V. It's a French name.
Okay.
Ira Devoyd Hall Senior.
This is January 4th,
Okay.
1988.
Okay.
My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. Ira Devoyd Hall in Oklahoma City. Sir, where were you born?
Colbert, Oklahoma. C-O-L-B-E-R-T. Oklahoma. That's Brown County, 12 miles south of Durant.
And when's your birthday?
August the 25th, 1905.
And who is your father?
Claude Devoyd Hall. That's where I got that Devoyd from.
And your mother?
Carrie Williams Hall.
Williams. Where were your parents from?
Well, I don't know too much about my parents, but all I know, they were born in the immediate century. She was born around Milburn, Oklahoma, in Tishomingo County, and my father was born in Berwyn. It's Gene Autry now, Oklahoma.
Did you know your grandparents?
Very, very casual on my father's side. Reverend George Hall was a big administrator in the Chickasaw Nation, and I don't know what those positions were he held. And he was a minister, and he married and all the Indians and whites, Indian black and Indians and intermarriage and all that stuff. He was quite a outstanding, respectable man in Carter County. But my other grandfather, Ruby, I'll have to give you, his name was William, but he always called himself by his full name, and I'll have to give you that later.
Okay.
And then my other grandfather was Tony Williams, and I stayed with them the first 2 or 3 years. They were just a few miles apart. And one amusing thing, I told my grandmothers I couldn't eat cornbread, so they cooked me a little pan of biscuits. And the other relatives get so mad. Go ahead.
When did the family first come to Oklahoma or Indian Territory?
Oh, they came in one of those runs, and I am not able to tell you when they came. But they came from Florida with their Indian masters and settled in the Louisiana Purchase, and then finally became as the Indian Territory. And you know, part of Oklahoma was also the Oklahoma Territory. And one of the distinguished differences the Indians freed their slaves, and they were supposed to receive 40 acres and a mule, and had no segregation to their slaves. They were very kind and loving. In other words, my great-grandmother, my mother's mother, was a full-blood Chickasaw, and that shows you they had very little segregation. Well, the Oklahoma Territory, they had all those runs, like the run of '89. They had several of them. Well, whites and blacks came from surrounding states, and some came from states far away to get to free land, and they brought in segregation. And I may be jumping a little ahead of myself, but we never had segregation in Oklahoma until 1970. And most of them are dead now, but we had people in this town who never went back to school after they segregated school. The one I can think of most famous, I don't know her first name, is Miss Holman. She belonged to one of the churches here, the Avery AME Methodist Church, and a long list of people after they segregated the schools never did go back anymore. Well, they never had any segregation of the schools in the Indian Territory. Well, after the Oklahoma Territory wanted to come in as a segregated state, and the Indian Territory wanted to come in as a non-segregated state, the federal government said they were both too small and they'd have to get together. So the leaders in the Indian Territory and the leaders in the Oklahoma Territory got together, and they did as usual, they outsmarted the Indians. And then they filed for statehood in 1970 for Oklahoma, and leave off the word Indian. And it came in as a segregated state. So back to my father's school teacher there in Tishomingo. Why, he was in one room, there was a Negro or colored, what they call black now, and the white missionary was in the other room. They had no laws at that time about white and black. So the people of Tishomingo didn't think a thing about a black teacher and a white teacher in the same school.
Was your family considered, were they Chickasaw Freedmen?
They were Chickasaw Freedmen, yes.
And you said it came from Florida?
Yes, originally.
Yeah. Ever hear any stories of the removal when they came with the Indians?
I should apologize because I taught Oklahoma history. You know, it was very gentle, and I could call you back and do a little checking, but I don't think the one week came in with a trail of tears, but they had a lot of them. And when they drove the Indians out and took the land away from them in Florida, many of the Indians died. Their freedmen or slaves died, and just a small percentage of them landed in the Louisiana Purchase, which later became the Oklahoma Territory. So I have to admit my knowledge is very limited for 2 or 3 reasons. See, all my people died, and the information I picked up was just from the neighborhood. Yeah, I went in there. I'd be getting a little ahead of my story, but
No, go ahead.
you see, when I left Colbert to go to high school, as I said, I had 3 years of elementary training in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, so I was considered a very, very advanced student. and the poor students there didn't know anything. And I helped my teacher teach. So the state had advanced quite a distance in educational opportunities for blacks or Negroes. And each of the counties in most of Oklahoma, except the larger places, provided 2 scholarships to go to high school at Langston. And I was urged to take the examination when I was in the 7th grade. And I made the highest mark of any of the blacks in Brown County. That was the name of this county that we lived in. Colbert was one of the cities, and Durant was the county seat. So I got one of the scholarships and got to Langston. But what I was trying to get to about education and school, I never was in the 8th grade. I took the test, made the highest mark, but the test didn't mean anything. So when I got to Langston, in the 9th grade, I had to take 7th year aesthetics such as grammar and language and composition. Then the next year I was in the 10th grade, but I had to take the same thing, continuation of grammar and English and composition in that field.
Now, is this at Langston?
Yes. And the strange thing that most people don't know, at that time, 1921, the high school department at Langston University was larger than the college department. And one other thing, the college had lost his 4-year program, and all they had was a normal program. Well, hardly any boys wanted to take a sissy program, as they call it. So they had to start the college program all over, and they had dropped it. And Thomas Black, who died several years ago, was the first college graduate under the second program in 1927. And at that time, there were more high school boys or students out there than there were normal. They called it the normal, but the proper name was CANNU, Colored Agricultural Normal University. Well, it remained like that until I believe about 41. And finally, as the high schools started building up and allowing blacks to go to school in these little towns, and getting back to myself again now, I finally finished out to Langston after 11 years. I became an orphan, complete orphan, when I was 14, or the 10th grade. And I had to work and have the money. And I finally ended up being a 5-time dropout because I couldn't stay in school. And to kind of mix the record up a little more, my wife Ruby and I married when we were both juniors at Langston. And the first year, she came back to school, and I worked here in Oklahoma City, Transportation Department, Huckins Hotel. Then the next year, she taught in her hometown, Muskogee. Nobody would believe this following statement. She got $40 a month teaching in Muskogee. Well, by that time, I had worked up to be a very outstanding student at Langston University, and I was over several programs. For instance, I had 52 boys worked under me. They were football players, and that's about all they got in return was free board. And I was in the Y work and was a debater and football player, so I got to go to different places with the football team, and I also got to go to a lot of places representing the YMCA, and I got as far as Boston. I was representing 9 colleges, black colleges. Well, when you look into it, it wasn't too much, because there were some whites there representing 20,000, 30,000 students, whereas the addition of all the black schools that I represented was perhaps 3,000 students. But anyway, Rube and I finished the summer of 1932, 2 years after we were married. And this is interesting. I don't know why I was attempting to be a principal. My degree was in business administration. So each place I made an application. They wanted me to pay $125 for the job. Well, I had the same idea I got now. I wasn't buying no jobs. I had too much difficulty finishing. So I don't know whether this should go on the tape or not. I told them, go to hell with those jobs. I wasn't paying no time. So I didn't get one. But I believe in the Lord strongly. Always have. And here is perhaps the first miracle that came my way. I got a postal card from a man that knew me as a kid. And I think he called me Hall. He said, Hall, if you have a degree and you're married, you want a job, come down here. I got a man who'll hire you. So I was working at the Huckins, the transportation department. Those boys called me the college boy then. Waiters and everybody. So they said, college boy, we'll take you down there. So we got in a car, had what you may not have ever seen. You ever seen a rumble seat?
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, you're very knowledgeable. It had a rumble seat, so the 3 boys in the front seat and 2 of us in the, what do we call the trunk now, the rumble seat. We went down there, found this man.
Where was this? Where were you going?
We were going down to college.
Oh, okay.
That's the same place where I got the scholarship. But the man we were supposed to see was a county superintendent, and he lived up to Platter, about 6 miles from college. So when we picked up this man, I guess he drove his car because we went in the room in our car. Went out there, and the moon was shining bright, and then got the man out. And Archie Lowndes is the man that sent me the postal card. And he said, Mr. Rice, here's the man that's telling you about. Well, my remembrance, he looked me over. Just like he was going to buy an animal or something. He got through, he said, well, I like him all right. And he said this, now this is knowledge for transcripts and interviews. He said, you got a degree? I said, yes, sir. He said, you married? I said, yes, sir. He said, your wife teach English? I said, yes, sir. Can she teach music? I said, yes, sir. He said, you hired. That was the end of the interview out there in the moonlight. And then he said, I have a cottage on the campus there. And you go to work July the 1st, but you write and send me a formal application. I did, and I got the job.
What was the date?
1933.
This is at Southeastern?
No. See, I got my degree at Langston University a year before then, because I didn't get a job teaching. I got my degree in 1932 at Langston University. But I didn't get a job because I wasn't going to pay nobody. And they were selling jobs all over Oklahoma City and everywhere else. They sent most of the school board members of Oklahoma City here to penitentiary for misusing money and selling jobs and all that kind of thing. So back to this job, I got the job. Well, I had never had any experience. And I talked to some elderly schoolmen like Mr. Woods, principal of Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa. I talked to Mr. Spencer, principal of Nowat. I talked to Mr. W. Anderson, Dr. W. Anderson in Okmulgee. I told all of them the same thing. I said, look, I got a job, principal. I said, hey, I don't know anything about being a principal, and never taught a day in my life. I never went to a high school in my life. I went to preparatory school at Langston University. Then I went to my great friend Roscoe Dungy, who was editor of the Black Dispatch. And to make it short, all of them told me the same thing. That I need to go to the State Department and confess. And I said, go tell them that I don't have any experience. And they said, yes. Well, I think I might use up a little more tape to tell you what those fellas told me. The man in Tulsa, head of the Booker T. Washington School, he said, don't ever fire a man or a teacher that lives in the community and don't have nowhere to work. There will be trouble continuously. And the man from Nowat, Mr. Spencer, he said, well, Ira said, school is rough, it's tough. And so you make it understood in your program that nobody's going to tear up that school except you. And you were going to build it. So don't let nobody run your school. Well, Dr. Anderson was a very cultured, polite man. And he said, well, those make it who want to make it. And knowing you like I do, you'll make it. Well, then I'd worked there at the Huckins Hotel in the transportation business off and on for 5 years. And Mr. Marquand Huckins, just as black, he didn't associate with whites or anybody else. But he talked to me a little. And out of all the blacks, and they did everything that there were just 2 boys they would let go up in, they had the whole 8th floor. And a boy named Clarence Williams could take things up there. He was from Belmont. And Ira D. Hall is a porter. We were the only 2 that had keys and could go up there. So I asked him for some kind of little recommendation. I said, it's not required, but I worked here long enough anywhere else in the world. And his recommendation was something like this. Ira Hall had been in our employ, that's the way he said, for several years. And we think he's honest. We think he's completely dependable. And we highly recommend him to do whatever you want him to do. Well, I came back a year or 2 later and made him on the street. He hardly would stop and talk to anybody. He just kept walking. I said, well, I'm doing pretty good down there. He said, well, let me tell you 3 things. Go back to school and get you another degree. save your money and stay out of politics, and kept walking. But that was an honor for him to take up time with anybody.
Now, what were your duties at the Huckins when you were? What were your duties at the Huckins?
Okay. Oh. See, it was the hotel where all the traveling salesmen came to bring their merchandise. See, the man was selling hats. He'd bring maybe 150 different kind of hats. We'd set up a room, or he's selling shoes, or he was selling suits or whatever. Then the merchants would come there and look them over and order what they wanted of. Not such small things and risky, like jewelry. The juryman would come and he would, see, after they got acquainted with me and found out I was going to school, they would send telegrams to me to get a certain room for them and have the room set up when they got there. And now back to this jury business. It was kind of a rule that they would pay the boy 50 cents a move for taking that jury. See, the man would be behind me, and I'd be taking the jury to different jury stores. And sometimes I would make $4 and $5 off of one jury man, because they all got acquainted with me. And then again, transportation, we didn't handle the baggage, check them in, check them out. But they would want a Pullman car out, and they would give me the keys to their room to take their bag out and check them, and take them over there and put them in a certain Pullman berth. Well, I averaged at least $5 every night carrying bags, a block and a half over to the Union Station, which is where the Santa Fe station is now. Well, so my biggest job was to work with the traveling salesmen. And then the head of our department was a very nice man, but he hadn't had any training. Well, airplane traveling became very popular, and he couldn't write those airplane tickets. See, a man wanted to go to Kansas City and then Chicago and then to New York and so forth, Florida. He couldn't write that ticket. So I helped him write his tickets. And I became an unknown, unnamed assistant, almost in charge of transportation. But the man, Mr. Scuddy, got all the credit because he was white and I was black. So one of those years I'd missed school. See, I told you I was a dropout. 5 times, any time I came back to Oklahoma City, Mr. Huckins, go away and tell Scuddy who it was. He said, all right, you all make room for her. And along with that, there was a drugstore across the street. And the man got acquainted with me, and he would say, all right, let me know when you get ready to go back to school. He'd have a box from toilet water and shoe polish, all the little things that I needed. Some of them, I guess, hadn't turned over in the sales business very well. And then I had people who I'd worked with, their work, setting up the rooms and all that kind of thing. Like Mr. Ehrlich owned the Ehrlich Manufacturing Company. Well, he would give me $8 every time he came. About $3 when I unloaded and $5. The reason I mention this money, the average black person in Oklahoma City at that time, even with a family, $17 a week was the standard price for hiring a black man. Now their wives could work out in Nichols Hill or somebody else where they took care of the kids. They usually have 2 or 3, one to take care of the cooking and all that, another maid to take care of the housework and all of that. And usually they have 2 or 3 and one to look after the children. Well, but their husband, working in garages and working other places. $17 on top of that. As I told you, I perhaps would make $17 in one day off of the jury people. Well, I knew I'd have $5 worth of bags every night, take away and put in the Pullman car. So I was making over $300 and people starving to death. But my wife was in school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was considered the top black employee, except the fellows in the dining room. They had the most classical dining room in Oklahoma City at that time. All black waiters, and they wore tuxedos and all that kind of stuff. And top level people, including the legislators. And all the big functions were held at either the Huckins Hotel or the Skirvin Hotel, where the Skirvin still exists. Well, I was kind of gnawed because everybody knew me. Well, I was the only one there going to college, and I had the advantage, and my major was business. So I fitted in very, very well. And this is humorous. I learned all the cheap customers. So I'd work and work and work. Guy give me 35 cents. You see, one of my men would have given me $1, $1.50. So when all those cheap guys would come in the front door, I'd see them. I'd run out the back. And my number was 6, and my nickname was Lightning. His head lightning. And so I worked there after I got my degree. And to answer your question again, I looked after the specialized work, and I also looked after the traveling salesman.
When did you begin work at the Huckins?
Oh, it must have been about 1926 or 27, somewhere. I worked there many years.
Could you just generalize life in Oklahoma City in the 20s, the roaring 20s?
Yes, it was a growing hillbilly town, and many of the places that are outstanding now, not quite that early, but before then they were mostly rural, and they had, before we put up those buildings, corn patches, cotton patches, not cotton, but other kind of produce, and wagons were not too plentiful. And the reason I said that, kind of a hillbilly, see, I left out, I worked in the Pullman service for 2 or 3 summers where they hired college boys. And I got a chance to go to New York, Kansas City, and California, and Florida, and all around.
And what are the duties of the Pullman service?
Well, you see, the Pullman company built their own cars, and they were sleepers. So they furnished the diners for people to eat on the train, and they furnished the luxury part of the train, the observation cars, and back there where they sold liquor and all that. And of course the Pullman part, we just dealt with the beds. And most of the cars, Pullman cars at that time, were long cars, and they had 16 beds down and 16 up. And the fantasy room was called the estate car. That was the big room that had a long bench in it for people to sit. And it had 2 beds, and it had its own bathroom. and all of that in there. Well, the rich usually got that car. And of course, later on, they made a lot of improvement. They had individual booths. It's like you go to a nice bar now. It had leather seats in there and all of that. But in the beginning, everything was long cars. So I worked about 3 summers as a summer college boy Pullman service, just in the summer. And I might as well get off track here. When World War II came, I had 4 or 5 kids. And I lost my registration card. I was C. And they replaced my card as A1. Meant you would be subject to the next call of men. Well, being from Indian Territory, we didn't believe in segregation. We weren't taught segregation. And I never did yield to segregation as such. So I didn't feel I should fight for a country where they wanted me to take my children in the back, and most places you couldn't eat. And getting a little ahead of the story, when I was with the State Department of Education of all black high schools, Dr. Todd, the state superintendent of public instruction, and would go with me sometime. And we'd drive up to a grocery store and get cheese and crackers and that kind of thing. And he said, all right, don't worry, someday you'll be able to eat like other people. And we'd sit there in the car and laugh and talk. Then when we'd have our meetings, the guy on the door would notice me, and he'd come where I'm sitting. He said, look here, I'm sorry, but you can't eat in here. And many times all the fellows would leave. I told them, quit leaving. I ain't worrying about me. I ain't worrying about that food. But finally, they broke up that kind of thing in Oklahoma, and I could eat with the rest of them. And out there in the state capitol, see, I had an office out there. And all but 1 year, it was 8 years, I couldn't go and eat in the cafeteria. They wanted me to go behind the coffee urns and back in the kitchen eat, and I wouldn't do it. So there's too much about Oklahoma and segregation and so forth. But there was some very progressive blacks. And I'd say 90% of the blacks in Oklahoma City right now don't know what I'm about to tell you. There were 3 brick buildings downtown owned by blacks. The Smiths, the Cottons, and Contrells. And they were 3 stories each. And they had law offices downtown. Right next to the Majestic Theater was Brown and Barber law office. They had a loan company in that same block. So then all the barbers in Oklahoma City were black. Some of them owned their shops and some of them didn't. So during those days, there were a lot of very, very nice white people. But most of them feared being nice because white people would call them a nigger lover and this, that, and the other. So folks would tell you privately, say, well, Ira, if all blacks, they didn't say the word black, then they used colored and negro. If all the blacks were like you and your wife, there wouldn't be no segregation. And then I worked on the side, parties. You know, I always did have 2 or 3 jobs.
So let me ask, if you couldn't eat in the cafeteria at the Capitol building, where did you eat?
Oh, you'd have to go home. There wasn't no place there where you'd eat. Snack bar, you could buy some cookies or something like that. There wasn't no place where you'd eat at all. And see, it wasn't built up out there then like it is now. And most of the blacks, see, one but two professionals out there, black cutters, myself and my secretary. So she would bring her a sandwich.
Now, what office did you have at the cafeteria?
Oh, I was, they called them in the beginning high school inspector. That meant I checked all the black high schools in Oklahoma. Well, they didn't like the word inspector, and Dr. Hard didn't like it, so he changed the title to Assistant Directors of Secondary Education. There were 8 whites and myself black. So I checked every black high school in Oklahoma, 97. Skokie, Oklahoma City, Ardmore, and all the rest of them.
What were you looking for? What were you looking for?
Well, we had about 8 major items on the checklist and about 12 minor things, including the major. We wanted to check each teacher's transcript, see whether they were teaching in the field where their college training was. And at first there were large numbers signed. As an example, a girl with a music degree may be teaching math, or the person teaching science may have a major in social studies. But we had to clear up all of that, and so I had to check each transcript. Another job I had was to check the supplies and equipment. There were so many books in math, social studies, supposed to be in the library for the children to use in addition to their own texts. So I had to check the library to see whether they came up to standard. And as an example, many of those schools had 7 sets of encyclopedias, which meant that the superintendent or the county superintendent, based on what kind of school it was, bought those books on sale or something, because every 3 or 4 years the encyclopedias were supposed to change so to be up to date. Well, some of those schools I'm referring to, they hadn't bought an encyclopedia in 12 years, but the racks were filled with encyclopedias all the same year. So, to answer the question a little more exacting, I had to check the equipment supplies for the science and all those different courses. I had to check the transcripts to see to it the teacher was qualified. Then I had to check the general curriculum to see whether children were getting the basics in high school education. And many schools, they were offering 4 and 5 units of science. Didn't have enough equipment for one. And to give you a rare example or two, certain schools in southern Oklahoma, where the children were taking biology and going to college, showing they had biology in high school. Here was what they had. They had a biological flow map where you could turn it over and see the blood and the veins and all the parts of the body. They had razor blades and fruit jars. Well, they were supposed to have had microscopes and all those other things that went along with the biological supplies. They didn't have any of them. So there was a school giving biology. The kid go to college. But he'd take a test, he couldn't pass it. He'd go to most schools, he couldn't flunk and go home. Well, the child had good abilities, but they had never had a chance to be trained. And like one of the schools, a very popular school, had over 5 units of science. Didn't have enough equipment for one. And then I had to check the procedural thing. As an example, the library was in the principal's room, or the home economics department had so many kids in there. The machines were so close to each other, a child trying to sew, his elbow would be in another child's ribs. And an example of the manual training. They didn't have any equipment, old saws, and bent up this and bent up that. in one town, they had one of these band saws, and the blade of the bandsaw would come off, which could have cut some child's neck off or something. Well, many times I just had to tell them if they didn't get the proper equipment, I would cut off the crediting of it. And most of the high schools didn't have 16 units. Well, you're supposed to have 16 units for a fully accredited school. But
Now, what is a unit?
Well, a unit would be, say, like Algebra 1 taught both semesters, first semester and second semester. Well, that made a unit. Now, there were some subjects half a unit, like commercial law, a half a year would be a half a unit, but they could split that. Then they could take psychology or some other course. Now, let me shock you. Out of the schools in Oklahoma, larger towns, Ardmore, Enid, Muskogee, Okmulgee, there weren't but 5 schools in Oklahoma offering any kind of business to black children. And Tulsa was the only black high school that had electrical equipment. Didn't have much, like electric typewriter and electric ad machine. But most of them didn't, so the black high schools didn't teach any commercial business subjects like bookkeeping and that. And to show you how bad it was, there was bowling, an all black town. Black superintendent, black mayor, black everything. They did not offer a unit of business. And you go downtown there, go in one of those general stores where they sold everything, men's clothes, women's clothes, boots and whatnot. And they had boots, shoes, and dresses. Been out of style for 8-10 years. Well, they didn't know anything about business. They had their first sale, an example of shoes, say, been $14.95. They'd gotten the money out of them. Then they started putting them on sale. They kept those shoes at $14.95, and they was all racked up in boxes in the back. Well, a store that had been trained in business, they would have had a few things that they hadn't sold. They'd had a dollar sale. Well, that dollar was just cash money, or $2.95, and they usually mark the thing down 3 or 4 times. Well, I'm trying to say this was all black town. Black superintendent, black board members. There wasn't any restriction. Now, a lot of towns, they couldn't have it because the whites weren't going to let them offer that. But there was a town where everybody was black. And I'm telling you, no business at all, no typing, no. So I went to the superintendent and so finally I got to be pretty courageous. I went to the school board. They said, yeah, Ira, if you get us a teacher, we'll hire. Well, there weren't many blacks trained in business. To get off point, there was Fisk University, one of the oldest universities in the United States, and they set it aside mostly for blacks. They were white slave owners and all that stuff. They didn't offer any business. And that was after I had finished at Langston. And after Langston, back to this business, there was less than 1% of the student body enrolled in business, and there were at least 800 students. So we didn't have over 7 or 8 into the business department. And I finished in the first class. And there were 3 of us got a degree in business administration. So business was never taught the blacks in colleges, universities, high schools, whatnot. So at that time, they had about 4 professions for blacks: a preacher, a school teacher, a lawyer, and a doctor. And they were very, very sparse. you take all the blacks who were enrolled in social studies and English and home economics, carpentry, and agriculture. Well, now, nearly every black school in America, over 50% of their courses are in electronics and technology, and talkback television and all that. So you can't hardly find anybody taking the courses that were the only courses when I was in college. So I'll stop there about the colleges and give you some of my personal experiences of what I found. There in Colbert, where I got my first school, my hometown, most of the children that came back to school had already finished in high school. And the majority of my students that first year, our students, got in the 11th grade. Now, they already had a certificate, but they knew they were reading science, reading math, reading everything. And the principal thought English was a foreign language. One of the men told me from the State Department of Education. So we said, "You offer any foreign language?" "Yes, sir, yes, sir, we offer English." And the principal was saying they is and you is and everything else. But anyway, we had two students that got in the 12th grade. Well, each of those students had gone to school in Ardmore, about 60, 70 miles away. So they got in the 12th grade. So we had just two students to finish. Now, here's what we found. Now, all the students were 2 and 3 and 4 grades academically retarded or below where they should have been. Well, 4 of the teachers was just like the principal, Ira D. Hall. They hadn't taught a day in their life. One of the girls from California, one from Tulsa, and one was from Bowling, and Jim Ellis was from Chandler. Well, the grades came in the first 6 weeks. Nearly all the teachers that were teaching what you call high school, 7 through 12, junior high school, were F's. Well, there I was, trained in business. They didn't know what I was talking about. I was using such terms as 30 days net and all that stuff. The teachers were separating the students by language. They didn't know what the devil the teachers talking about. So we had a faculty meeting. And we agreed that the students didn't know what we were talking about. And they weren't learning. But they were honest students, those little country towns, country places. We had 6 schools that we closed to make up the city school, what they call consolidation. So we agreed at 2:30 every day, the buses didn't leave till 4. We'd set up 2 rooms. And one of the rooms was for math and science. The other room was aesthetics, English, and anything of that nature. And the children could go in either room promiscuously. Didn't have to knock on that. Ask or teach anything they want to ask or teach. They had 2 teachers in each room. And the example, a child would come up in this aesthetic room, English, grammar, composition. He said, "Teacher, what do these 2 little dots on top of each other, one on top of the other, mean?" He was talking about a color. The teacher would explain to the little child, maybe it's 10th grade, 11th grade. The child just look and grin. He said, "That's what it means?" He said, "Well, what's the purpose of it?" I said, "Well, that's where you want to have a series of things, like the farmer. They maybe start off talking about the animals. Well, then he want to get around to the fruit. Then he put one period over a comma and call that a semicolon. He's changing what he wants to talk about. He said then he put in his watermelons and all that, all of that, all of that. Well, maybe he still wanted to say something else about the animals. His hogs and cows and stuff. Well, he'd have 3 different things that he discussed if he used a colon there, without starting 3 different sentences. Well, that kind of thing. Same thing over in the math room, the science room. The student would come up and ask a teacher this, and the teacher was always nice and kind. But we did that for all the rest of that year. And I think we did it part of the 2nd year. Now, let's prove to another phase. Those children were learning so fast, which gave me my first interpretation that when God made people, same family, same nationality, with different learning abilities, different IQ, different extra talent, and all that kind of stuff. So we had children there that were near genius, hadn't had a chance. And so we offered those children commercial law. You know why that? My degree was in business. We offered them general bookkeeping and all of those kinds of things. Well, I took the position that since their parents didn't know anything about it, the community didn't have any inspiration, that's about the only way a child could kind of increase their intelligence in this day and age, that day and age. So we offered courses in the State Department, getting back to them. They say, we're glad that you don't have any of this background, because not all the principals we get, they've been the science teacher, they've been the courts, they've been something, so we won't have to, you listen to these 2 words, we won't have to untrain you and reteach you. Untrain you because you got things mixed up, and reteach you because you don't know things. And they sent a man down there before school opened up, helped me work up my committees and work out those things. And then this man came back the first week of school and stayed there with me all day, helped me with the committees, helped me with that. Well, the State Department fell in love with me, and the first year we got 10 units, didn't have any before. Next year we got 5 more, made us 15. In the 3rd year, I got 19 and a half units accredited, which made my school rated higher than that of the white school, and the only school in Oklahoma manned by black teachers and black principals that was ever rated higher than the white school in the same town. Now let me climax that. Those children went to college, got on the honor roll, and today, some of those children down there now, all those schools are gone, after they integrated. They have 3-bedroom homes and a den, double garage. And I'll just mention one, Hugh Dawson, 5 kids, and all of them turned out to be professionals. One a doctor, and one teaching out here at Northwest Classroom, and one in some other kind of field. And all of his children turned out to be professional. Well, when Hugh went to my wife in English, he could split verbs. My wife, he said, Miss Hall, is that right? That's the way it's supposed to be. And he turned out to be a very accomplished vocational agriculture teacher. And he has one of the nicest homes there in Colbert now. And I had a 82nd birthday celebration at the church. It was on my birthday, August 25th. And he and his wife came up there from Colbert. And they both talked. And she said, well, there was never nobody on earth like Mr. and Ms. Hall. So they took us in as we were babies, and nurtured them, loved them. And they went on to tell how we changed the life of the people in that community. Then when Hugh came on, he said Mr. Hall was better than a father to all of us. He inspired us. We went to school, went to college, and made it easy. Well, then the State Department, after those 4 years, they got me a superintendent job. I was superintendent of all Negro towns. And I had to go through the same thing there down in Colbert, except they were more sophisticated. They didn't know anything, but they were sophisticated. And we built a gym there. And this is just true about all blacks. I wanted to build a gym, and I asked for a bond issue, $3,500 to build a brick gym. But prejudice was all over Oklahoma. And see, in Okfuskett County, all the cities were either black or white, no mixed town except Willica. Well, to make the story short, they turned down my $3,500 levy and said we didn't have enough surplus. Well, the district didn't owe a penny. So a man came and told me, he said, "Ira, so you don't know what you're doing. Why don't you hire you an auditor?" I got an auditor. And he said, just cut it down 50%. So we put in the bond, $1,500, built a brick gym. And it's the only brick building there. All the schools are closed. All of them are gone. And some fellows the other day, in fact, Dr. Todd, who is assistant director, he's a vice chancellor, he's a higher education. He said, "I saw your name down there on the building where you were superintendent." I said, "Yeah. That's the only building there for the community to meet and so forth and so forth now."
Is that in Colbert?
No, that's in Clareview, Oklahoma. Clareview, Oklahoma. Well, I'm going to rush through. They were selling jobs there. All the teachers worked there were paying for their jobs. When I came in, I brought 2 teachers, and Mr. Ellis, who'd been down at Colbert with me, and a young lady I hired from Oklahoma. All the other teachers were paying. And then they had to work 2 weeks free. So they have a 9-month school to get accreditation. Well, after I got this auditor, we started getting all that corporation money and railroad money and all the other tax money. And we paid each teacher their full salary for the first time down there. And we got books and all that kind of stuff. Well, then later I went to the State Department of Education. I'll stop on this. Dr. Hart sent for me to come talk to me about being the black high school inspector. I never did go. Well, he finally got elected. And when they were inaugurating the different people in their different offices, O.B. Graham lived in Tulsa, and he said, "Why don't you go see Dr. We went in there, and he said, "Dr. Hodge, here's the man I've been talking to you about." And to make the story short, he hired me and announced in the Daily Oklahoma on June the 26th, I'd go to work July the 1st. And 3 or 4 things about that. Most of the small high schools at that time were alternating the 9th and 10th grade for high school blacks. In other words, a black boy had to take the 10th grade subjects before he had the 9th grade, and many of those 9th grade subjects were prerequisite for a 10th grade subject. All right, we stopped there. Then I told you about that equipment stuff. We made a requirement that the schools must provide equipment and supplies and so forth. Well, that meant those schools that didn't have those supplies in math and science, home economics, they had to go buy them, didn't even take accreditation with them. All right, so we also stopped the principals from having the science department in their office, the library in their office. No space for the children, but they were giving them credit. And so we regulated the black 97 high schools on the same basis that the whites were. And we'd have Dr. Hodge to come to the state meeting of black teachers. Everything was separated in. blacks couldn't go to meetings where there were whites. And he'd make a little speech about 4 or 5 minutes, go like this. He said, "You teachers and people in Oklahoma and the newspapers want to know what are my standards about black schools and white schools." He said, "I don't have but one standard. He said, all the same." And he said, when I was county superintendent in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, so you couldn't tell by the building, by the equipment, by the curriculum, whether it was a white school or a black school, except you look at the color of the teachers and students. So he said, that's my philosophy, that's the way it has been, and that's the way it will be. And he was re-elected 3 times. He died in office in his 4th term, just like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And after they brought in integration, he said, Ira, I checked with the superintendents, I didn't find but 5 who said it didn't make any difference to them who checked that school. All the rest of them said, no, we don't want no Negro checking out the school. So he got a job for me here in Oklahoma City, and I was principal for the first integrated school in Oklahoma City. And I'd go out to visit him. So before he had to leave office because of illness, he and I were down there in that cafeteria where I couldn't eat. We stayed down there talking until they had cleaned up the dining room, ready to lock the doors. And he said, well, Ira, I guess we better go. I said, yeah, that's the last time I saw him alive. And I'll tell you, he was one of the greatest persons I ever met in my life.
Dr. Hodge?
Yeah, Dr. Oliver Hodge. The building named after him out there now, the education building, called it Dr. Oliver Hodge building. And he did some things that were just impossible. I'll give you an example. You see, up until I came in there, the whites checked the school. Well, the Negro children come and sing. They'd fix them a big dinner and all of that. And he never would check the supplies or check the teacher's transcript. Just entertain them and they'd leave. Well, you see, I had to do what all the other folks had to do. I had to check those schools. So we sat there and reviewed all that. And then after he passed, they were going to dedicate that building. And his wife, Mrs. Hodge, and I got to call her too, I think she's still living. And she made sure that I was on that dedication program. And I guess the last thing I could say about him, he didn't have any black rules, white rules. And I had some fellas that had been checking black schools before I got on there. And he told them, he said, now look, said, Ira's got the hardest job of any of you. So you've got to go up against custom and tradition. Now I don't want any of you checking any of these black schools. You just tell the superintendent that the hall will do that. And to make it short, one boy wouldn't stop. He fired him. And certain superintendents were still prejudiced. And I'd come in and require about standards of books and equipment like that. Well, the superintendent would write Dr. Hodge and say I came down there with that northern attitude and philosophy when I was born right there in the Indian Territory, and say we'd like for you to send somebody else down to check the school. He would call in his secretary, who was named Burton. Say, Ira, come up here. He said, I got some more of these letters I got to answer. And, you know, they all called each other by the first name. Well, blacks always say Mr. Say Mr. to a 2-year-old baby. And so he'd dictate that letter and he'd read like this. My man, or the man in charge of your school, will come down and check it. And I read several of his letters one year to the other. And he said, I want to tell you, he's doing his job. We're proud of him. And I know what your problem is. He's, didn't use the word black. He's colored. And I'm sorry. All we recommend you to do, if you want your school to stay on the crediting list, follow these requirements. So I end up the educational side by saying that one of the finest men I ever knew was Dr. Oliver Hard. And thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars were spent improving the black schools all over Oklahoma, including Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Now, let me get off in my other part of life. As a child, I looked at black people after I got to travel in the Pullman service, got in the insurance business and all that stuff, real estate. And I saw people who had the desire and ambition but didn't have no training. So I got involved with the YMCA, which became my parents. I had my parents dead. I got involved with the NAACP. I was the membership chairman in '46, and we got the largest membership that ever had before that time and since that time. I got involved with Langston University that I had finished, and I headed the everything they had out there. We were alumni, president, alumni, and so forth. And we did quite a bit, but I would say these two things, that Langston University had never had any friends, neither as alumni. They had people who were working up. They had a chance to be well known, get to pitch in the paper and so forth. Then I worked for the East Side. Well, it wasn't East Side, really. I worked in the big United Fund or the United Way. You know, they change that name all the time. And they changed it again. Next year, they're going to have a new name for it. And I headed over here on the East Side. And I have some pictures where we had all kinds of people. Ministers, school teachers, business people, white people, and all working. And then the people from the central office. So I put in 5 or 6 years heading the East Side United Fund drive. And then I worked with the Lions Club. I headed the Boys of America Club. It's something like the Boy Scouts and so forth, only it was raised at the top. And many these boards and things. I was the only black in the total organization and became the president, and 2 or 3 other things in that angle. I have some 88 trophies and plaques, honor certificates and so forth that I got from my organization. I didn't ever ask for any of them, and since I retired, I've gotten at least 30 or more of them since I retired. And nearly over in my office, they lined up. There's some away on the piano. There's 2 hanging up there by the door. And just recently I got one from the Central Y downtown.
Let me back up and ask, when you were a small child, what chores did you do around the house?
Oh, that's something. Everything that I could get involved in. We'd watch my older brother and I, not the oldest, he was the middle. We'd watch our mother cook. And we learned how to cook watching her. And as soon as she'd leave, we'd run out and catch a chicken and kill the chicken, cook the chicken and make the bread and make this. In plowing, I'd get out there and set the plow over farther and make the team go fast. And man, I'd do a whole day's work in a half a day in a way. And I would pick up grapes in the woods, take them down and sell them for 50 cents a gallon. I lived on the railroad where there were dewberry vines. I'd go pick up gallons or two of dewberry, take them down and sell them. Plums, same thing. Steal a gallon of a dozen of my mother's eggs, sell those. And I go out and make speeches to the trees and all that. And before my mother died, I was kind of a choice kid. I had a horse of my own. Nobody ever worked him. I trained him just like a show horse. And so I would answer that question. I did everything that came along. I never was lazy. Because see, I heard a speech early, and it said, work of accomplishment, 3 areas. If you don't want to do it, you're mad with the world, you do a good job, but it's drudgery. The second kind of person, you so sincere and so busy, you do a good job, but you don't have time to talk to nobody. You're not peaceful, you're not kind. And the third guy does his work, he does in play. You stop him, he tell you a joke, kids come along, you give him some candy, and he was a jolly fella, everybody liked him. But if you would come and look at all 3 of them work, and they were gone, they did a good job. But the first one had a bad attitude, so forth and so on. He said all 3 of them died. And the first guy was so treacherous and mean and hateful, they couldn't get anybody to be pallbearers. His own family had to be pallbearers. The second guy, only his friends, close friends and relatives came. The third guy, the mayor, closed down the city for 2 hours doing his funeral. That stuck with me until today. So I decided that I was going to be that third guy. I used to make a lot of speeches, and I knew at least 100 jokes. I could tell you 5 jokes now about lawyers or ministers or anything, because I'd use these jokes to fit into my speech. So unless you ask me another question, that was my philosophy up to now, and to point it up in about 3 angles. I don't believe lying will ever pay off. And I don't think having to prove something or staying with the thing will hurt you. And so to put that in one sentence, you must tell the truth. It'll never hurt you. Now, the second part of it is, you've got to recognize who is the boss. In our religion, the Christian religion, the Lord, His Son, are the bosses. And you can't change theirs, you can't go around it, so you've got to stay with it. I'll give you an example or 2 there. When I in college, the president wanted me to do something I thought was dirty, and I wouldn't do it. Like tell him who the boys were that was drinking whiskey and gambling and going to girls' dormitory. I said, well, I've always wanted to be a little jackleg detective. Who's going to tell them, you or me? He said, they won't know it. I said, I can't snitch. Well, I came back to school the next year, stayed 18 days, and I couldn't get him to sign the work. Well, later on, he gave me the best job in Langston University. Number 2, we lost our home. We moved in a half a block where they were from blacks. And he ended up, we stayed there 3 years after we got home. They put us out. And the third one was, they were going to take that second home because we have some improvement done. And when they got ready to close the loan, they finally had a second mortgage. So they were going to put that house up for sale. And a man came, I never seen him before, and he said, Miss Hall, your husband's here? So to make that story short, he went on out and he said, you bring everything over to the office, over to my home Monday morning, I'll pay him off. Figured up, I brought him over $4,200 worth of bills and everything, second mortgage on it. He paid off every penny of it. Then, because I had this business degree and all that stuff, I said, well, what about a little chattel mortgage or some kind of mortgage or a note or something? He said, listen, said, if I die, I won't need it. If you live, you'll pay me. Well, heck, I kept on, so finally he had his lawyer to draw me up a mortgage, $100 a year, no interest. And the last one I'll tell you about these miracles, you see. I decided that God was God and he was over everybody, and you didn't have to buy and bend and sneak and lie. So I've been a very blunt man for what I stood for and what I believed in, and to follow that through. I got in real estate because they took my home and all that stuff. And this is the climax. I sold 11 houses, my company did, over on Garland Drive, right in that Northeast Shopping Center there, close to it, on both sides of the street. And I don't think no real estate company has ever done that before or since, unless they were a builder. But these were individual-owned homes. And the second thing under that, they were up right back down there, what used to be Euclid. That was the nicest home, but they were all white. I sold 7 houses up there on both sides of the street. And the last thing about these miracles, the Lord, about 7 or 8 weeks ago, of course I've been in intensive care many times. They rushed me over there and I was on the death table for over 2 hours. And they revised me. And they had called in the chaplain to come in and pray for the family. The girl came back and said, I think they're about to get him out of it now. Well, I've had another attack since then. So I would say, without detailing any of them, I've had 5 miracles in my life with my family. It's just as good as any in the Bible, like Daniel and the lion, the 3 Hebrew children, etc., etc., etc. And this is an honor that most folks don't have and never will have. One of my boys got his master's at Harvard. The other boy got his master's at Stanford. And those are 2 of America's leading schools. And that older boy now is one of the top executives of the national IBM. He has 5 countries under his supervision. And he is one of the, let's say, top-level people in authority at IBM. The other day, he was made one of the 9 governors of the Post Office Division, and he had to be certified and approved by the Senate, Vice President, and all of that, and all and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And he was the first black to ever work up like that in IBM. And he's the only black of the 9 governors. So the Lord has opened doors that couldn't be opened, sealed things that couldn't be sealed. And so if I make an ending statement, I would say here what I said on TV once. They want to know who my parents were and how I got where I did. I told them, I said, well, the world became my parents. And the world provided me all the way through. And I'd say to the world right now today that nobody could make me agree to anything I think was wrong, because the Lord would straighten it out. And I thank God to be here 82 years. I'm very grateful. Try to be honest and fair to everybody. And I have friends that there's just no way I could replace them or find anybody better. I'm going to end up with my little friend girl across the street. She's about 13 now. Tryla, T-R-Y-L-A. And when I was taking my exercise after I started going down, she'd be behind me. I said, Charlie, what you doing? She said, oh, I just coming along, see how he's gonna make it. And when I was driving, when I was ceasing to drive, she'd see me getting out of the car, and I'd have maybe a few little items. She'd come and help me bring them to the house. See me sitting on the porch, come over here and sit on the porch. And the history is, she had a little old radio concern, and she would be out there in the corner, blowing it, playing it, disturbing everybody close around on either end there of 20th. That's the street in front of us here, and the other there is Phillips. So I talked to her about the noise and disturbing people. She said, that's so. So she finally thinks that I'm one of the gods. And when that first snow came earlier, it must have been last year, she said, Mr. Hall, I want to come on and clean off your walkway. I said, you don't need to do that. I said, I'll get some. She said, no, we want to do it. And a few minutes later, she had her cousins and friends, and they cleaned off that walkway out there. And she said, oh, no, we're not going to take nothing. We're not going to take nothing. Well, I would say it started off me needling her, meddling her about that loud noise she's making out there. And I'd say Trowler is one of the best friends I have on God's earth. But it started off with my needling her. But what I'm trying to get to in counseling, see, I have training in counseling, and I set up an office of premarital guidelines and family relations. And I've helped get a lot of folks married, and finally the world got so bad they wouldn't stay married. I quit. But Trowler is an example of my faith. And here it is. My faith is that anybody living can change. And we, the people of this earth, must have faith and believe. Yet, the world is upside down. The mafia and the guerrillas and the terrorists got the whole world trembling, and nobody ever gets to court against mafia because they kill all of them. Well, the United States is filled with anti-democratic people in the colleges, in the pulpits, in the legislature, in the Congress, and it's fun now for people just murder for the fun, killing their wives and the kids and all that stuff. Well, I said this is the end of my statement. I'm saying the Lord is trying to talk to us. We hear this not. And you go back to medieval days, ancient days, and all of that, they never had anything as terrible, anti-man, anti-God as we have today. And I'm thankful to be here at 82. Yet I'm frail, but I'm thankful.
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
If I ask the question, Jim Crow is, how would you answer that?
Well, Jim Crow was a figure of speech used to keep certain people from developing culturally, educationally, economically, and so forth. So they applied laws to be sure that those people wouldn't develop. Like certain streets they couldn't live on, no parks they couldn't have, no swimming pools, and as I told you earlier, some places didn't have any school provisions. So Jim Crow was a nickname that mostly black folks, some white folks, they said, man, they got Jim Crow there. You can't live on that street. Our children have nowhere to play. And so it was a term almost as a synonym of segregation the Jim Crow state, or the Jim Crow restaurant, the Jim Crow garage. So it was used to deny rights to certain people. Well, we got so many nationalities and minorities in America now, you can't count all of them. But most of that Jim Crow was set aside for what we call black people now, who were considered as colored or Negroes.
When you worked with the Pullman service, did you have any contact with Jim Crow on the trains?
Oh, the Negroes on those same trains, very few were ever riding in the Pullman car because they'd have to be above the Mason-Dixie line. That was that imaginary line where all the states on one side were segregated and the states on the other side, or the cities, may be permissive. Some place you could go, some place you couldn't. So this term Jim Crow, they say the Jim Crow states. And as an example, my children went to Tennessee, Fisk University, and on the way back, I don't know how they got up there, but on the way back, the conductor had come through, so all right, he put up a sign, and all the black folks had to move. So Jim Crow in travel, buses, Pullman cars, and whatnot, they could not ride with other people when they got in what they call the Jim Crow state. Now the porter, he worked there just like he worked at a filling station, or somebody come here, and the gas company, they might be a KKK, they might be John Berkshire. Well, all you know, he's from the gas company. So Jim Crow wasn't quite that easy. They'd look at you. Now I had an uncle in World War I. He passed for white. He was light, and he didn't have all that brogue, so he passed for white man. I have some cousins here. They were real light, and instead of talking, they knew they'd talk flat. So they go to the window of the theater, put up two fingers. You'll give them 2 tickets. So what I'm saying now, there were 3 ways to identify black folks. The texture of the hair. You know, say it's real kinky. Well, all of them are kinky. My mother's hair was just as silky as it could be. Couldn't keep a hairpin in it. But the texture of the hair, the color of the skin, and the brogue of the voice. Now, if you could get by those 3, you'd have no trouble. I don't know whether I answered your question or not.
Yes, sir.
I got to have some help here. Ruby! I've lost my nitroglycerin. I'd like to mention one thing.
Okay.
This intermarriage thing. Would you like to hear me discuss that?
Yes, sir.
Well, you see, it has been a question that has never been flat-footedly answered. I used to go down to the University of Oklahoma and talk to classes. I had a lot of friends, teachers. And the first question after the discussion, do you believe in intermarriage? Well, I knew which way this was coming. See, I said all those psychology courses and sociology courses and other things. Traveled all over the United States in Pullman service. Why work limited, debating limited. Then I'd been an orphan early, worked at all these rich places, nightclubs, rich country clubs, golf clubs. And, you know, I had seen everything. Not that I understood it, but I'd seen it. So here's what I'd say. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, they didn't like that. They said, you know. I said, no, I don't know. So they keep fumbling around. I said, do you mean what you call white people, what you call Negroes and darkies and niggers marrying each other? Well, I wouldn't say it like you said, but I guess that's the thought. I said, okay. I say, you don't have no question. You go back and check every president of the United States we have had, beginning with George Washington. I said, we're all mixed up. Some French, some English, some Spanish, and so forth. And I said, you take every governor in the state of Oklahoma now. He's all mixed up. And you take all the leaders, presidents of colleges. They got several kind of blood flowing in their veins. And I said, I don't want to make anybody angry in here. But every one of you in here, I don't see anybody like Chinese or something like that. They mixed up too, but they mixed up within the Chinese world. I say, so everybody in here is a victim of intermarriage. I say, when you get home, ask your mother and father how much German they got in them, or how much French, or how much Portuguese, or how much this. I said, so America not only believes in intermarriage, there's perhaps more intermarriage in America than any nation on earth. I said, now I know what you want to ask me. Do I believe in what they call white folks and black folks marrying each other? I said, you ever heard of the word octagon or hectagon or mulatto or anything? I said, well, certain parts of our country now, the United States, a whole lot of light Negroes, North Carolina, South Carolina. And I said, I've traveled in those states where you couldn't go out on one of those plantations. You had to get permission to come in there because they still had slavery going on. And I said, now, let's bring this thing down to a nutcracker. I said, you see me? I said, my great-grandmother was a full-blood Indian. My mother's mother was an Indian. And I said, a man that used to be the state treasurer here, I don't want to call his name, he dead now, was one of my cousins. He came from the Eastman family. So I want to tell you in a nice way the best I can. I have French blood in my veins. I have English blood in my veins. And I have Indian blood. I said, now I want to clear up one other thing with you. I said, they were used, when you say African, they think of black folks. I said, there are many people, generations born in the continent of Africa, never had thick lips, never had a brogue. They look just like you look. And it's only the black folks, African, and I said they didn't have the word Afro-American then, but you take now, you can find all kind of pamphlets of Afro-American. They said, all right, what do you think? I said, I don't think a damn thing. I said, these folks need some knowledge. So when I got through, man, they look meek, they look humble. I come back the next year, boy, nobody asked me nothing about intermarriage. Because they didn't know. Now, maybe I won't say anything else after this. See, I got off in that sociology and all that stuff and going to these workshops and travel, these national meetings and all that. We asked the question, why was America so ignorant about Jim Crow and about other things? We said, plenty of these authors know about it. Got over to an author, you know what he said? It's a matter of economics. I can't put the truth in these books and get them adopted by school systems, by colleges. So he said, we can't afford to tell the truth. Said, hell yes, we know about all this, what Ira's talking about. But said, it's a matter of economics. See, I've had friends here in this town. Shit, I'd meet them up to the snack bar, he'll act like they didn't see me. A guy'd be in my office, I'd be in his office out of state capitol, 5 o'clock. Man, he'd leave and go out of one door, I'd go out another door. We get to the parking lot, our cars parked side by side. and the guy hated it, but hell, he don't make no friends. You know what they call them like that? Nigger lovers. Anybody would be friendly with a black man or a colored man, his partners and friends call him a nigger lover. Well, you call a man a nigger lover a short time, man, and kill him. And we've had folks that live in New York move down to Florida or somewhere else, and they start acting nice like they always to the colored. They're losing their business and getting little notes. So a man that lived in New York, next door neighbors were black, moved to Alabama, moved to Mississippi somewhere, and stay there while he was the most prejudiced man in town. So I stopped again.
Did you have any contact with the KKK?
No. They knew me, and see, our telephone, I think it's still tapped, was tapped. But when I worked in El Reno, my sister was there, and I worked there one summer in a barber shop. And I went to the city drugstore and brought back some barber soap. Well, the folks who ran the barber shop were Catholic. And the man called me and said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "That's them damn KKK. We don't deal with them. We don't, so take that damn soap back." Well, you see, I had trouble with my mother wanting me to take stuff back. And I never did want to take anything back to the store. I went behind the alley somewhere and got rid of all that soap. Went to another drugstore and bought that soap out of my pocket. Well, he never did know. He thought I took it back. But I just didn't want to take it back. But it was so bad. They'd march up and down the streets there in El Reno and all that stuff in their goods and all. So my answer to you, I never had any personal contact with them. See, I had a lot of personal contact with communists. When we lost our home, they thought that if they would show me where white folks were mean and everything, we would react in white folks. And the girl would come over and take our kids to play and all that stuff. But I have never been prejudiced. I never will be prejudiced. But see, do you know much about the John Birchers?
Basically.
See, that's another KKK on a high class level. And I can't think of Federation, you know, Lee was, and all of them was fighting during the Civil War on the southern side, and they operated in a way supported KKK. But my answer is no. I never had any personal conflict with KKKs.
What about the WPA or the CCC program?
Well, the WPA was the one who built that gym that I was telling you about down there where in Oklahoma County, Clearview. Those during the WPA days. And that's why I got that building up for $1,500. I got the brick from the penitentiary, $2 per thousand, when they were selling for $7 per thousand. And we applied for the WPA, and they furnished a whole lot of that free, and they didn't arrest county commissioners in for giving you sand and gravel, so I got the sand and gravel free. But getting back to WPA, had all the projects over the county, little buildings, community buildings, road culverts, and all that, little community house built by WPA. And I wished I had one of those cartons. Great big valve written across it, WPA. They worked in the streets. Then they had a lot of little jugs, little buckets. They had different names like CCC, NY, NYC, all that stuff where people could go to school. They could get help, they could get this. And so I was just blooming out and getting pretty smart when the WPA came along. And where blacks were pretty smart, they did a lot of things for blacks. Just like FHA, I mean the let's see, the Veterans Administration and the HUD, HUD, HUD. I can't think of those things, right? But they did a lot for black people. Well, after the prejudice came along, they cut down. But they have buildings all over this country that the HUD and the VA, but as pressure came, they stopped it. So you asked two questions. One was the KKK. What was the other?
Oh, about WPA and CC.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, you see, the CC, they furnished training schools for blacks. They had one down in Bowling, and man, they was teaching those Negroes everything down there, paying the teachers good salaries and everything. And a lot of blacks got their first training through the CCC.
Could you, were you involved in any way, or could you discuss when they had the sit-ins in Oklahoma City?
Oh yes. We lived out north Creston Hill, and the kids would come there in our den and make their placards. You know, what they put on those placards, equal rights, and we want a right to eat and all that stuff. And my wife had a committee to feed the kids. So they get hungry, they'd bring food to feed them. And my oldest boy, the one that's the vice president now at IBM, got those 5 countries, they locked him up in the Skirvin Hotel coffee shop. Early that morning, they wouldn't let anybody else in, they wouldn't let him out. He stayed in there half a day by himself. And they'd bring him something to eat, something he wouldn't take. He said he knew it was poison. And so...
Why did they lock him in the...
Well, you see, all the kids were planning to come in there. And he got in, and they locked the door behind him. So they had him hostage. So they kept him there half a day. So I know all about they would go down to Cats and go all in there and stand out there. They'd go to John A. Brown, go all through there, and be hundreds of them down there on the streets. And so we call it the kneel in, the sit in, the pray ins. And they did a lot of good in a way. And they kept on. They decided they better let those folks come on in there, and so they finally got together. They let them eat in Cat's drugstore, and in Brown's, John A. Brown's cafeteria, and so that happened all over the country. But Oklahoma City had one of the best sitting and kneeling programs in the United States, and a girl named Clara Luper was honored all over this country. They was having the best. You know.
What made the sit-ins in Oklahoma City better than the other part of the country?
Ask that over again.
The sit-ins and kneel-ins in Oklahoma City, what advantage do they have over other parts of the country?
Well, Oklahomans have always been pretty nice people, because see, most of them weren't born, you know, like I told you about those runs. At one time there wasn't anybody in Oklahoma but Indians and blacks. Well, and all that land was just open land, and they had runs on it. So the people in Oklahoma have never been what you call black haters. They were just living by custom and tradition. But in certain places, certain countries, certain states, what Negroes could do here and get by with it, heck, they'd lynch them in other places. In fact, they used to catch white girls and black boys together. Well, all they'd do is take them downtown, arrest them, turn them loose. Well, in many places they would have lynched that boy. They'd put a chain around his neck and drug him all up and down the streets. Or the next morning they'd find him hanging from a tree somewhere. Well, Oklahoma didn't have much of that. We had a few lynchings in Oklahoma, but not very, very many. And see, we used to keep a record of these, how many lynchings and stuff we could find out different states had and publish it every year. So Durant and a few other places, I think down in South Capitol Hill here. But there was never enough lynching going on to create fear in Oklahoma.
Roscoe Dungy.
Oh, he was my lovely friend. You know, he was one of those I told you I went to when I got that job. And Roscoe Dungy was a man of conviction. And see, a lot of things they didn't know. Number one, he never had a family. He never did marry. And he stayed mostly wherever his paper was. Well, at first he didn't. He was down there at 2nd and Central. His little printing shop was down in the basement. Then finally he moved, and finally he got up there, 324 Northeast 2nd Street. Well, then he had his apartment back there, bed and all that stuff, but it was all in the same unit. Well, he'd get up 2 or 3 o'clock and write on his editorial, and his editorial was usually half a page. But back to the man. He was considered crazy in this respect. If he felt like he needed to write an editorial against the governor, he'd write it. Or against the mayor of Oklahoma City, he'd write it. And he had some friends who would do anything. As an example, they arrested a black man down at Chickasaw. And Pruitt was one of those kind of lawyers, didn't give a darn about the rest of the world. And they called him up, told the jail guy, and they said, "You release that man, we're coming down there to get him." Roscoe Dungy and Attorney Pruitt came down there. Pruitt had his fifth of whiskey, his hand set on the sheriff's desk. He said, "Go in there and unlock that damn door. Let that man out." And they said, "He ain't done a damn thing." Well, Roscoe Dungy was with him. Well, something very personal. I headed NAACP drive that year. I told you we had the greatest membership they'd ever had before or since. Well, I had one of those loudspeakers that was having a campaign going on, and I had one of those campaign trucks. And I was out making speeches about how badly Negroes were treated, as an example. I said, now, a lady was the second cook, chef down there on South Broadway. And the main chef burned up the liver. When the boss came, he said she did it. She said she didn't. As they beat her up, threw out the back door, and threw her clothes out behind. They called the police. The police wouldn't arrest her. And I'm saying this over the loudspeaker. So the police decided if I did that again, they were going to arrest me. So I was down on 2nd and Laird the next night. They came there and arrested me and said I was disturbing the peace. Well, I was disturbing the peace. So I called Mr. Dungy, and he got Muskoski, who was one of the lawyers. You can tell by his name that he wasn't altogether one of these true Americans. So they came down to the police station and got me out. And when the trial came up, Muskoski said this man should sue Oklahoma City Police Department. So he hadn't done anything wrong. Just using his rights as a citizen of the Constitution. So the judge asked me, he said, when will this drive be over? Muskoski spoke up and said, it'll never be over. He said, don't answer that question. He said, you got the right to be a citizen. Well, Dungy was in the middle of all of that. And he was considered a man of courage, and everybody expected to find him dead all the time. But he died a natural death. He lost his mind and everything. Yes. What? I haven't taken any after breakfast. I just took that morning medicine. This is my doctor and nurse and boss here.
It's open.
She gets behind with her medicine. She's about 2 hours, 3 hours behind with this medicine. Come here, tell me to take it.
Well, you have to take it at least an hour before you
I
get your
know,
next
I
meal.
know. You know, I got to take this exercise on this cardiac machine too today.
Okay.
Well, anyway, you don't want to hear this family squabble here.
I'm about to go to the dentist. That's the reason I'm here. Please excuse
Give it to me 2 hours after I had my breakfast.
Thank you, and please excuse
We
me.
talk about my good friend, Mr. Dungy.
Would you describe his personality?
Well, he was a dignified looking man. He kept his hair cut short, but not bald. And he was considered a gentleman. And he never went to programs, anything, unless he was invited as a speaker. And I used to go down there. He and I talked, as an example. He was always exposing anything that blacks did that would hurt blacks. So I was with the State Department of Education then, and they were having a meeting down the bowling. And I told him about it. He said, no, don't you go to that meeting, because I'm going to expose all these Jim Crow Uncle Tom. You ever heard the word Uncle Tom?
Yes, sir.
All these Uncle Toms. And he said, don't you go. So I went back and told Dr. Hodge, my boss. He said, well, Ira, if you haven't got no more sense than to protect yourself, you just ought to quit. I said, why shouldn't you go? I said, well, he said it's going to be a pretty tough meeting. I ought not to go. He said, well, if you can't take care of yourself down there, you just resign. Because if you got no more intelligence than that, he almost got mad with me. I went back and told Mr. Dungy. He said, hell, will you take my boy down with you? Talking about his newspaper man, his photographer. So he told me not to go at first, but after I straightened up with my boss, he sent his photographer and reporter down there to Bowley with me. But what I'm telling you now, Mr. Dungy was a fair, honorable man. He never got nobody in trouble because of his philosophy. I'll give you another example. When they were paying the white teachers about twice as much in Oklahoma City as they were paying black teachers, the National NAACP decided Oklahoma was a good place to break it up because we didn't have these mean, evil, dirty white folks here. And they got a girl out of Langston named Ada Lois Cyprian to be the guinea pig. And so she went through breaking up the law school down at OU. But getting back to this original story about Dungy, they found a girl teacher over to Douglas High School named Emily Jones, and asked her would she be the guinea pig, go down and swear how much salary she's getting and to compare it with white teachers, how much they were getting. She said yes. Now, to say why black folks, I never discussed it, why black folks were far behind, they weren't Roscoe Dungy. They were ashamed to tell the truth. They wouldn't tell the truth. They double-crossed. And many blacks had good jobs to keep other blacks in their places. So back to Emily, they started taking up collections to help pay the court costs and everything. And many of the teachers didn't give a dime. And they stopped speaking to her there at Douglas where she worked. And she was a troublemaker. So Roscoe Dungy and the NAACP went on with the case.
I'm going to have to move my car. Excuse me.
Okay. He was one of the best friends I ever had. When I say friend, I mean all the way, even before I finished college. He would loan me a little money, and I'd pay him back. Then I had all the kids occasionally. I'd write a check to a college. I'd hustle up the money before the check got back. He'd let me have the money. But back to Dungy as a human being. I said he was a gentleman, a real gentleman, very respectful, very courteous to any and everybody, but very courageous. Now, as an example, you came in there with something that he didn't approve of, and he'd tell you, I'm sorry, I can't print it. Or if you printed something in another paper and he thought it was wrong, he'd write, give an answer back in his paper, call your name, call everything. And all the people down there on 2nd Street and the 300 block, that's where Black Dispatch was in, they just loved it. They were gamblers, prostitutes, and then there was some business people. They had several doctor's office in the 300 block there. They had a couple of lawyers, drugstore on each corner. Everybody respected Mr. Dungy. He was considered the black savior for black people. And as an example, you see, at one time, all the blacks on the east side were from about Durant up to, that was on 4th Street, a few on 5th Street, few in the 10, 8, 900 block on 9th Street, and they had a couple little patches. They had a patch of blacks about the 8, 900 block west of Walnut, and another little patch a block or two up farther on Wall. Then in the 900 block and 1000 block on about 7 and 800 block on 9th and 10th Street, there were a block or two of Negroes, but they were all surrounded by white. Well, Roscoe Dungy, when integration came, segregation was legally ended, we still couldn't move and buy in white areas. And a guy named Floyd run the shoe shop, and they arrested him 3 or 4 times in one day. Roscoe Dungy get him out through McCoskey.
Why was he arrested?
Because he moved in an area that Negroes hadn't lived before. You see, that's really put me out of my home. I was a half a block